I'll let you into a secret. I really don't like summer. All that hot, dry weather, you can give me cool, wet and miserable any time of the day. And yet heat waves are becoming more common, at least where I am, and I loathe them. But there are a few things we can do to mitigate those horridly hot and dastardly dry spells. Let's take a look at them. The first thing we need to do is water effectively. That means watering deeply and not necessarily frequently. It's best to water really thoroughly, really deeply. That'll encourage the roots to kind of travel down in search of that water so that you don't have to water quite as often. Now, the very, very best time to water is not long after sunrise, but with sunrise somewhere between 4:30 and 5 AM here, I am rarely up that early. So for me, I tend to water in the morning once I've had my coffee, got my daughter off to school, and then come out and do some watering. But really, any time in the morning, or failing that, in the evening works well. Watering in the morning is a smart move because the temperatures are a lot cooler, so a lot less water will just evaporate off straight away. It also gives plants a chance to dry off in the sunshine so that they're not going into the evening kind of wet, which, you know, potentially overnight could encourage kind of fungal diseases and so on like that. Now, help that by making sure that you direct the end of your watering can or hose right in there towards the base of the plant, like I said, just to get it so that it's going to be shaded by the foliage and down there, obviously, where the roots are. If you're short on time, and goodness knows I am, then you're going to have to prioritise the most valuable or vulnerable plants. So in water restrictions or during a severe heat wave, then that means things like newly sown areas and seedlings, fruiting crops and young plants. So things like mature potatoes, onions, garlic, some herbs can cope with more stress than, say, young seedlings. Remember that drip irrigation and soaker hoses deliver water right at ground level, which makes them really, really efficient. It reduces water loss to evaporation and is a lot more efficient than, say, an overhead sprinkler, and it'll keep the foliage dry. And by the way, we've got all sorts of irrigation options that you can add to your plan in our garden planner. During really peak heat, I kind of ease off feeding most of my plants because lots of feed encourages lots of growth, but that does mean more watering and more work for you. So instead I cut out all feeding except for my fruiting plants, which I still feed but at half strength, just to keep things at a more sedate and relaxed pace. And then once the temperatures drop right back down again, I'll pick up and resume feeding as normal. After a really thorough watering, you can help lock in that moisture by applying what's called a mulch. Now, ideally this will be between 1 and 2 inches or 2 to up to 5 centimetres deep. It could be something like straw, wood chips, more compost, leaf mould, or my personal preference, just because I've got lawns here, is to use grass clippings, applied in a slightly thinner layer, but more often. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to shade the soil. That means it's going to evaporate less quickly, what I've applied. It's going to keep the roots cooler as well, so they'll be a lot happier. And it'll help to suppress weeds, which would otherwise compete for the same moisture and nutrients that our plants need. There we go. And I would say in a really hot spell, this stuff here is probably one of the most effective tools you have. And of course, as it rots down, it'll improve the soil structure as well. Goodness me, it's warm. And as a general rule, adding more organic matters to the soil, whatever that may be, is always going to be worth it. Things like compost, leaf mould, well-rotted manure and so on, as they rot down, they improve the soil's water holding capacity and its ability to buffer against those temperature extremes. The ratcheting up of temperatures calls for more shade, and temporary shade cloth can be a real salvation in the searing grip of a heat wave. Now, something like this, a 30 to 50% shade cloth, is ideal for all sorts of salad crops like well, obviously lettuce, spinach, arugula rockets, cilantro, coriander, all that kind of stuff, young brassica plants, as well as little seedlings such as my carrots here, which have just about popped up. I've had this on here to keep them nicely shaded, just to keep it a bit cooler as well, and combined with regular watering, that's helped them come up nicely. once plants have grown on a bit, you don't necessarily want the shade cloth sitting directly on your plants, so you can always secure it over some sort of frame, either one you've made yourself or one like this here. And I just use clothes pegs to keep it from blowing away. Now, you don't need shade cloth. You could use, for example, old net curtains, for example, perhaps some sort of horticultural fleece road cover, white sheets suspended somehow over your crops. Just improvise. The important thing here is just to take the sting out of that heat and create some shade, especially from the midday or afternoon sun. Another simpler option perhaps is just to call into play taller crops to provide shade for shorter crops. So in this case here, my corn, which is still quite short, but in another couple of weeks it'll be as tall as me, and then I can grow shadier things here, or shade loving plants like lettuce or spinach. Other tall crops would be, for example, climbing beans, or perhaps some cheery sunflowers to add their cheer at head height but cast cooling shade further down. Now, container plants are super vulnerable in the hot, dry weather. They dry out and heat up a lot quicker than plants in the ground. So one simple solution is just to group them together like this, and then the sides of the pots can shade one another. It also means they're close together for easy watering. Something else you might consider is just shading the outsides of all the pots, especially those on the sun-facing side, with bits of old cardboard, or for example here some sort of hessian or burlap, and just keeping everything cool like that. Now, if it's really hot and things are getting a bit desperate, you can always move your containers temporarily into somewhere cool and shaded from the afternoon sun. I have to be honest, I find watering containers pretty tedious. Water them, let it drain through, come back and water them again. So here are a few things that I use to kind of help spread the load a bit. The first thing is simply to pop your pots into some sort of tray or little reservoir like that, just to catch the water, and so that it doesn't just run straight off, it can absorb it from the bottom as well. Then there are things like watering spikes. This thing here, terracotta, pop your water in like that, and then shove it into your pot, and you can see the water drain through, and you can just top that up as and when. And then there are bigger reservoirs for things like seedlings and modules and young plants like this. They're in there, just fill it up an inch or so, and then let it take it up from the bottom, and it just means you can water everything in one hit. If it's warm and windy where you are, then I do sympathise. Heat combined with wind is a lot more damaging than just heat on its own. So you can set up temporary screens, especially around sort of recently planted young plants. That could be something like this sort of screening here, maybe a trellis with sort of temporary plantings up it, or it could be some netting, for example. Anything that's going to filter the wind so it's a lot less damaging and is going to dry out the area around your young plants a lot slower. Heat-stressed plants often mature quicker. Now, regular harvesting will help to reduce some of that stress because there'll be less of the plant to support. You're taking some of it. It'll stop things becoming tough and bitter, and of course it'll encourage productivity to continue. Now, this is especially the case with summer favourites such as peas and beans, zucchini or courgettes, as well as tomatoes, cucumbers and salad leaves. Oof. And don't forget that the hard-working gardener needs a refreshing break as well. Keep yourself cool, get in the shade every now and then, and keep yourself well hydrated. And if temperatures do stay consistently above 85 to 95 Fahrenheit or 30 to 35 Celsius, then many gardeners, including myself, take that four-step approach. Remember, we're going to, 1, water really deeply towards dawn or early morning if possible. 2, we're going to mulch nice and thickly with organic materials to shade the soil. 3, we're going to apply shade cloth of 30 to 50% during the heat of the day and for vulnerable salad crops and young seedlings. And 4, longer term, we're going to improve our soil by including plenty of compost and manure to get that lovely water holding capacity up. Do these things and your garden will sail through any kind of dastardly dry spell and hot heat wave, and you'll keep those crops coming. Don't forget to try out our garden planner for all those fantastic irrigation options. You can just select them from the drop-down menus and then pop them onto your plan. And you can try the garden planner for free by following the link or the QR code over here. And for more on collecting rainwater to keep your plants watered naturally during even the hottest spell, head on over to this video next to see how to do that. I'll catch you next time.